This is the Pick Your Poison podcast. I'm your host, Dr. JP, and I'm here to share my passion for poisons in this interactive show. Will our patients survive this podcast? It's up to you and the choices you make. Our episode today is called Sublimation. Mystery writers and mystery lovers, this one is for you. We're going to discuss a real-life scenario where a person can be found dead in an enclosed space without evidence of trauma, intrusion, or even another person. Listen to find out how it can happen. Today's episode starts in your car. You're on the way into a shift and already late. Worse, the traffic is building up, blocked by a slow driver ahead. The slow car suddenly swerves erratically across 3 lanes of traffic, miraculously missing everybody else. It rolls into the grass, finally stopping when it hits a shallow ditch. Several people pull over to check on the occupants of the erratic vehicle. The traffic crawls past. You debate if you should stop, but you're already late and the slow-moving car didn't actually hit anything. You decide the medics can deal with this one. Your car inches ahead, finally pulling abreast of the scene. 2 bystanders are pulling the driver out of the car. You take one glance and swerve off onto the shoulder. The glance is enough to see that the driver looks dead. The bystanders are trying to help, but they haven't checked her pulse and are definitely not doing CPR. You're wearing scrubs, so the bystanders automatically move away from the driver with a relieved look on their faces as you walk up. You put your fingers on the woman's neck, confirming she doesn't have a pulse, and start CPR. As you compress her chest, the song Stayin' Alive starts to play in your head, just like they taught you in every ACLS class to ensure the right rhythm of greater than 100 compressions per minute. The incongruous absurdity of the song in this situation never fades, honestly. You confirm somebody called 911 and EMS is on the way. You show one of the bystanders how to do CPR and move to the driver's head to give rescue breaths. Waiting for your turn, you look inside the car. Someone else is slumped over in the passenger seat. You ask another bystander to check on the passenger. They say she's breathing but unconscious. You debate about leaving her in the car. Technically, it's better to wait for EMS to remove someone. They have a backboard and they can take the proper precautions, etc. But there hasn't really been an actual car accident here. The car basically drifted off the road at about 5 miles per hour. Whatever is going on isn't due to trauma, and you'd rather keep an eye on her in case she gets worse. So you ask them to pull the passenger out of the car, and they place her on the ground next to the driver. The passenger is unconscious, but pink and breathing with a pulse. Finally, after what feels like hours, you hear a siren wailing in the distance. The ambulance, it's attempting to get through traffic. The driver's ribs are crunching underneath your hands due to the force of your compressions. I have to say I really hate the cracking of broken ribs when I'm doing CPR, but it means you're doing it right. The medics arrive, scoop the patients up, and take them to the emergency department. You get back into your car, arriving at just about the same time. The driver, a 67-year-old woman per her driver's license, is still in cardiac arrest and is assigned to your colleague. The passenger is your patient. She's a 41-year-old woman. She's unresponsive and not moving when the nurse pops in an IV. This is a critically ill patient, so rather than start with vital signs, we'll start with the ABCs. A is for airway. She's unconscious and not protecting her airway, meaning she's not awake enough to keep from choking on or aspirating her own secretions. B, for breathing, her respiratory rate is low at about 6 breaths per minute and shallow. Her chest is barely moving. In addition, her oxygen level is hovering around 70%, even after the medics put her on a 100% oxygen non-rebreather mask. So A and B, not okay. We need to intervene with intubation and ventilation, and if we don't do it quickly, we're about to lose C, her circulation and her pulse. After intubation, her vital signs improve. The nurse tells you she's afebrile with a temperature of 98.6 Fahrenheit or 37 Celsius. Her heart rate is normal at 90 beats per minute. Oxygen levels improve to 95% on 100% oxygen. Okay, so now you have a chance to take a deep breath. She's stabilized for the moment, so it's time to start to figure out what's going on here. Tons of things cause altered mental status and hypoxia, i.e. low oxygen, but it's unlikely both occupants of the car developed the exact same medical problem at the exact same time, bringing us directly to a toxic exposure. When I say altered mental status and a low respiratory rate, what's the first thing most of us jump to? An opioid. Currently, fentanyl is at the top of the list. But they were driving, did I hear you say? Well, that hasn't stopped people from taking opioids in the past. Did they both take them at the same time? It's a possibility. Some of you might have wanted to give a dose of naloxone before intubation. Not a bad idea, but since her oxygen was only 70% on 100% oxygen, I was reluctant to wait much longer before intubation. What physical exam finding should we check to help us determine if this is an opioid overdose? That's question number 1. Hint, remember the third part of the opioid intoxication triad? Is it A, muscle weakness? B, loss of reflexes? C, small pupils? D, abnormal lung sounds. The answer is C, meiosis or small pupils. If her pupils are small, I'd be fairly convinced this is an opioid overdose. You turn on the flashlight on your phone and open her eyes. The pupils are normal. Your colleague is on the other side of the curtain, still coding the driver. You ask what the driver's pupils look like. He says fixed and dilated, meaning large and in this case unfortunately consistent with severe hypoxic neurological injury, i.e. brain damage. He asks if you have any idea what happened. You say no. His patient didn't improve with intubation, nor has CPR helped. It's now been more than 30 minutes. He asks if anyone has any other ideas. No one does. He calls the code and announces the time of death. You wince thinking that your patient might be headed down the same path since you have absolutely no idea what happened to these women in this car. On the plus side, her vitals are improved and she's holding steady. As usual, you've ordered basic labs, EKG, x-rays, urinalysis, and a head CT. Maybe we'll find a clue in there, but truth be told, I don't think this is where the answers lie. We need to give this more thought. Could they both have eaten something, shared a meal that was poisoned or contaminated? Sure, and lots of poisons we've talked about cause arrhythmias like VTAC and cardiac arrest. But an ingestion causing altered mental status and hypoxia, there's not much that I can think of that isn't an opioid on that list. Maybe a barbiturate like phenobarbital, but I don't know. How about carbon monoxide exposure? I love this one. Was there something wrong with the car? Something causing carbon monoxide to be rerouted inside rather than out of the exhaust pipe? It's possible, but you saw the car and it was a new model, meaning it'll have a catalytic converter, meaning that the engine produces very low amounts of carbon monoxide. So low, for example, it's almost impossible to kill yourself in your garage. You've seen the movies or the headlines where someone commits suicide with carbon monoxide from the car inside the garage, and this was possible with old cars without catalytic converters. However, newer models, and when I say newer, I think since the 1980s, not since last year, with the catalytic converters, they produce such little carbon monoxide, you'll actually run out of gas before the carbon monoxide rises to lethal levels. The respiratory therapist is adjusting the vent, and you ask her to do an ABG, an arterial blood gas, and a co-oximetry, or a COAX for short, for further evaluation. The COAX will give us a carbon monoxide level. It's definitely worth checking, but I don't love carbon monoxide as the cause here. What about methemoglobinemia? We discussed that several episodes ago. Did one of them open a popper inside the car? It's possible, stranger things have happened, but it doesn't seem super likely. That said, we'll also get a methemoglobin level on the COAX, so we can find out for sure. All right, if it's not carbon monoxide, what about other gases? Some are classified as asphyxiant gases. They do exactly that, interfere with oxygen in the lungs. Some displace oxygen, others interfere with oxygen transport, essentially keeping the lungs from absorbing or using oxygen. This results in asphyxiation internally rather than externally from someone putting a pillow over your face, but it ends in the same result. No oxygen. Nitrogen and helium are asphyxiant gases. It's kind of difficult to imagine how these got into their car. Nothing fits exactly. Her chest x-ray comes back normal, no fluid like pulmonary edema, no pneumonia, etc. You sit down at your desk to check in on the lab results from some other patients. A few minutes later, the respiratory therapist brings you the ABG results. You frown and say, was this a venous stick? When you order an ABG, you want an arterial specimen. It's fairly easy to accidentally obtain venous blood, and you can usually guess from the results if the specimen was arterial or venous. Venous blood is more acidic and, not surprisingly, has a lower concentration of oxygen and a higher concentration of CO2. You've worked with this respiratory therapist for a long time. She says no, it wasn't venous, so you believe her. You look more closely at the results, agreeing. A venous stick can't really explain the abnormalities. The patient is acidotic. It's not surprising given that she was barely breathing and was hypoxic. Her oxygen levels are fine, though a little lower than what you'd expect for someone on a ventilator. What stands out here on this ABG is the partial pressure of carbon dioxide. It's extremely high. It's 100 millimeters of mercury, and normal is around 35 to 45 on an ABG. Even on a venous specimen, the max partial pressure of carbon dioxide is around 50. So this is double. The COAX is normal, she has negative methemoglobin levels and a normal carbon monoxide level. All right, so what causes a high carbon dioxide level? Could it account for our patient's symptoms? It's pretty common in the ER to see high carbon dioxide levels in the setting of respiratory failure in patients with exacerbations of asthma or COPD, chronic bronchitis, or emphysema. They can't breathe, and what happens when your lungs don't work? You get low oxygen and high carbon dioxide. Now, carbon dioxide in the body is very interesting. We tolerate normal levels, obviously, but when it rises, it causes a severely altered mental status. Sometimes patients are somnolent and difficult to arouse, as if in an extremely sound sleep. Other times, the altered mental status is agitation. To illustrate just how severe it can be, let me share with you a case I'll never forget. When I was a resident, I picked up the chart of a 25-year-old man whose chief complaint was an asthma exacerbation. He'd been in the waiting room for an hour or so. His triage vital signs were normal. I walked in the room to see a huge guy, probably 6'5", almost 2 meters, and at least 250 pounds or 110 kilos. It was immediately clear that this was not a mild asthma attack, but a severe one with impending respiratory failure. He was breathing extremely rapidly at 50 breaths per minute. He could barely talk, but he did his best to answer my few quick questions. He was sitting on the stretcher in a tripod position, which is the classic pose when a patient can't breathe. Basically leaning forward with their hands or elbows on their knees, trying to maximize lung expansion and air intake. I called the nurse, asked her to get albuterol, a bronchodilator for a breathing treatment, and steroids. She took one look at him and ran to get the meds. I told the patient to hang in there for a few more minutes. He'd been behaving pretty normally up until now, but instead of waiting, he started to get up off the stretcher. This was surprising enough because people who can't breathe don't want to move. If you're at the gym and you want to catch your breath, you don't keep exercising, right? You stop, obviously. Not to mention, he'd finally gotten back after waiting in the waiting room for treatment, so where did he think he wanted to go? I asked him to sit back down and said the nurse would be right back with the medicine. He did it for a second, but then started talking unintelligibly and got up again off the stretcher. He lurched forward a few steps, as if he were drunk, though he wasn't. I tried to coax him back to the stretcher, but he was not listening to reason, and he stumbled out into the hallway. At this point, several other nurses saw what was going on and tried to help, but he couldn't be reasoned with, and he became increasingly agitated, trying to hit me and fighting off the nurses. I was afraid he was going to run outside or have a cardiac arrest right in front of me. His gait was so unsteady, he fell down instead, which turned out to be fortunate. It was the only way we were able to get him back on the bed, and it took 4 people to lift him up. At this point, he completely lost his mental status, so we intubated him immediately. His blood gas showed a massively high carbon dioxide level of 100 millimeters of mercury. Before, he was a completely normal person who came to the ED for an asthma attack. While waiting, it got worse, made his carbon dioxide level rise, which then caused psychosis and his crazy agitated behavior. So I tell you this story to show you just how dramatically altered a patient can become if their carbon dioxide level is high. So what's happening with our patient? Did both the driver and the passenger have sudden asthma attacks? Obviously not. Something else is causing this elevated PCO2. There's another asphyxiant gas. Question number 2, it's time to pick your poison. Is it A, phosgene, B, carbon dioxide, C, VX, D, chlorine gas? The answer is B. Carbon dioxide itself is considered an asphyxiant gas. Now, just a word to clarify, perhaps I should have said this sooner, but carbon dioxide is what we all exhale when we breathe out. And as I said, some levels are normal in the body. Carbon monoxide is generally a poison, although we may have a little bit in our bodies. Phosgene is a very dangerous gas, but it works at the level of the cells to cause energy failure, not direct hypoxia. VX we've talked about before. It causes cholinergic toxicity like organophosphates, sludge, and the killer bees, which our patient doesn't have. Chlorine gas is an irritant, causing shortness of breath and pulmonary edema before it causes complete collapse. The time course here is a little too quick for chlorine gas, and she wouldn't have a negative X-ray either. So, how can you get carbon dioxide toxicity if it's not asthma or COPD? There are some really unusual ways and one really common way. Let's start in this case with the unusual ones. And that brings us to question number 3. Toxic gas released from a lake, which was believed to be carbon dioxide, killed thousands of people in which country? Was it A, Morocco, B, China, C, Colombia, or D, Cameroon? The answer is D, Cameroon. In 1986, about 1,700 people died after toxic gas was released from Lake Nyos. This lake happens to be in a volcanic crater. It's not clear what caused the gas release, and the composition of the gas isn't 100% certain either, but some pretty convincing research suggests it was carbon dioxide. The clinical picture fits, and high concentrations of carbon dioxide were found in the lake water afterwards. Survivors recalled hearing strong winds, disturbed animals, and then lost consciousness. They woke up to thousands dead around them. I can't imagine what that must have been like. It's estimated that 5,000 other people survived the exposure, and some of them complained of cough. But interestingly enough, the biggest problem in the survivors was terrible whole-body skin blistering. Mucous membranes weren't affected like you'd expect with chlorine gas, and the blisters, they were believed to be pressure ulcers. We sometimes call them barb burns. If you take a barbiturate overdose, you can be unconscious for days to even a week, leading to extensive soft tissue injuries from pressure ulcers. And that's what these look like. Interestingly enough, 2 years earlier, also in Cameroon, at a different lake, 37 people died from a similar toxic gas release. Occupational exposures are probably the most common route of carbon dioxide exposure. It's used in places like breweries and greenhouses. It can act as a knockdown gas, like we previously discussed with hydrogen sulfide. For example, 2 workers became unconscious and 1 died after entering a wine fermentation tank that had CO2 build up inside. CO2 can also build up in sewers and in silos. It's a big issue in submarines. You can imagine a bunch of people exhaling CO2 in an airtight environment. They have to have CO2 scrubbers on board. And there's a tragic case of a submersible working on an artificial reef. The submersible became trapped, and 2 of the crew members died from CO2 toxicity. Now, random aside, CO2 has been used to kill rats. Yes, by infusion into burrows in cities like New York and Chicago. It's quick, relatively humane, though that might be debatable, but better, I guess, than dying of intracranial hemorrhage from an anticoagulant rodenticide. Most of all, though, it's used because it doesn't poison the food chain like many other rodenticides. If you use regular rat poison, birds that eat the rats can be poisoned, dogs and cats are at risk, etc. So that's not the case with carbon dioxide. Anyway, back to our patients. We don't know what happened to our patients before they got into the car, and we don't know what kind of work they do, but it's a safe assumption that they were well enough to think they could drive before this sudden collapse. I'm not really getting the sense this was an occupational exposure, they weren't in a submarine, and probably weren't fumigating rat burrows. There is one way to get carbon dioxide exposure that all of us have probably seen and been around. Question number 4. Is it found in A, detergent, B, shampoo, or C, dry ice? The answer? C, dry ice. What is dry ice exactly? Well, it's actually a lump of solid carbon dioxide. And when it melts, it doesn't become liquid like regular ice, but it sublimates, turning directly from solid to gas. I'm sure you've been to a party with dry ice, gotten a frozen shipment with it inside, or walked past someone's house at Halloween. Why weren't you poisoned? Because toxicity requires an enclosed space. Now, a quick aside, you can sustain burns from touching dry ice. These are actually frostbite, so be careful. But what I want to talk about here is actually carbon dioxide poisoning, not the local burns you could get. If you use dry ice with your windows open, in your backyard, or at a well-ventilated party, there's no danger of toxicity. The amount of carbon dioxide released is minuscule compared to the levels of oxygen in the air, and nothing's going to happen. But if, on the other hand, you're exposed to the dry ice in an enclosed space, then carbon dioxide levels in your body rise, displacing oxygen and resulting in severe toxicity. It doesn't take as much as you think either. Normal air contains 0.03 to 0.04% of carbon dioxide normally. 10% carbon dioxide is a high enough concentration to cause seizures and death, and at levels of 30%, carbon dioxide causes immediate unconsciousness and can cause cardiac arrest within a minute. There are a number of tragic cases of people trapped in freezers with dry ice or driving cars or trucks with dry ice resulting in exposure. In one case, a Dippin' Dots ice cream salesman had dry ice in his car, his mother-in-law died, and his wife nearly died from high CO2 levels. Natural disasters are a risk factor for exposure, as we saw with carbon monoxide and generators. There was a man who died while transporting dry ice in a truck to use as a refrigerant before a predicted hurricane. And you may have heard about this. 3 people died at a pool party of a Moscow influencer after dry ice was put into the pool, reportedly for quote-unquote visual effects. 30 kilos, that's like 66 pounds, was dumped into the pool. And tragically, her husband was one of the victims. Okay, crime writers, this one is for you. Dry ice fumes, i.e. carbon dioxide, can kill someone in the room above or next door, for example, without leaving any trace. What I didn't know before this podcast is that CO2 is used to carbonate soda in fast food restaurants, and an 80-year-old woman died in a McDonald's after the gas line to the soda machine malfunctioned. The woman stopped to use the bathroom, and CO2 had collected in this enclosed space, tragically killing her. And oh my God, there are spa treatments and things called dry bath bags, where the body is enclosed and CO2 is infused in. I cannot believe this. Apparently, they're inspired by natural spring baths in Europe. What is it? It's like a neoprene bag, and then carbon dioxide is infused in from a carbon dioxide tank. Your head's supposed to be out of the bag, and reportedly it causes blood vessels to open up. Apparently, many patients feel relaxed and fall asleep. According to one website, it's also, you guessed it, an aphrodisiac. I know listeners of this podcast will find it hard to believe, but one of these malfunctioned, tragically causing a man's death. All right, back to our patient. She makes a full recovery the next day. Law enforcement investigates, finding several boxes of dry ice in the backseat of the car. The women were transporting it to a party, clearly didn't realize the risks, and unintentionally asphyxiated themselves. This is a fictional case, as are all our cases to protect the innocent, but it is based on real poisonings. Dry ice, for special effects, is dangerous in an enclosed space, as I said earlier. So fog machines are often used in movies and parties nowadays for similar smoky effects. What is the toxic alcohol in fog machine juice? Hint, we discussed it in the Halloween Haunted House episode. Is it A, diethylene glycol, B, ethylene glycol, or C, isopropanol? Follow the Twitter and Instagram feeds, both at PickPoison1 for the answer. Remember, never try anything on this podcast at home or anywhere else. Thanks for listening. It helps if you subscribe, leave reviews, and or tell your friends. Transcripts are available at pickpoison.com. While I'm a real doctor, this podcast is fictional, meant for entertainment and educational purposes, not medical advice. If you have a medical problem, please see your primary care practitioner. Until next time, take care and stay safe.